Hey, what's up guys, it's me your boy Oraban Kavinish back here with another brand new video, and I hope you guys are having a great day. So first of all, I would like to make another apology. I know that I've apologized a handful of times already for this same reason, but yeah, this time it was genuinely for a reason that I just could not avoid, which is for not uploading video for the past month. And actually I did film a review for the first race of the season that happened in Bahrain, and I actually did prepare a thumbnail and everything for that video, but I just was not able to upload the video. I was never been able to sit down to edit that video, and by the time that I did get time to edit, it was just too old of a content to upload on the channel, and that's why I did not upload the race reviews like I had promised at the start of this year. So yeah, without any further ado, now let's get into the video, guys. So we are here right after the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. What a boring of race. And honestly, when FIA first announced the new sprint race format that they're going to execute for this weekend, when I read it, I was actually pretty excited and anxious to see how this is going to work out. We basically had one free practice session, which then proceeded on to the qualifying for the race that happened on Friday, and on Saturday we had the sprint shootout, which is the qualifying for the sprint race, and then the sprint race happened itself on Saturday, and Sunday we had the main race. So on paper, when you look at it, it seems like a weekend that will engage the audience all through, right from Friday to Saturday all the way to Sunday. But the problem is that once it was executed, for some reason at the end of the weekend it left me kind of exhausted. And as Formula 1 fans, we love racing and we want to see all of our favorite Formula 1 drivers, all of our favorite Formula 1 teams go out racing on track. But after almost a month long of break, having such a tight weekend that is just full of event after an event after an event almost made the main race look not so interesting or accelerating, let's say. I think still the sprint weekend needs a bit of a tweak, and this sprint race format is definitely not ideal. I feel like the teams and the drivers should be allowed with some leeway to modify and tweak the car for the race weekend. The parc fermé is just too tight right now, and with teams and drivers only getting one free practice session now with the sprint weekend, I think it's only fair if FIA actually makes the parc fermé rules a little bit more lenient, with the teams being able to tweak with the suspension setup and so on to make the car more comfortable to drive. So now let's get on with the weekend itself. Well, I'll start off with AlphaTauri. Well, it's kind of a bittersweet weekend for them. Yuki Tsunoda suffered a handful of issues with the car, especially the puncture that he had in the sprint weekend. Not good. And the team actually sending him out after knowing that the car has suffered a significant amount of rear suspension damage. I mean, you can see when he's limping the car back into the pits after the first pit stop that he made for the puncture. The wheel is very much crooked and he was crab walking that car into the pits. So I don't know what AlphaTauri was thinking, and I think that $5,000 or 5,000 euros of fine that FIA has put for AlphaTauri for sending out a car that is not fit to race on track was just a bit less of a punishment. I think there should be some serious punishment or a consequence for a team to put out a car that is not worthy to be out there on the track when all the other almost 19 cars are at full speed racing each other. And then let's talk about Nick De Vries. Well, what to say? He's one of the drivers that I was really backing this year. I expected him to just come out of the box and just perform so good, and I expected actually De Vries to beat Yuki Tsunoda this season, but it's actually happening the other way around. De Vries just not having the right weekend, and after round 4 his results are not showing any progress, or it's not promising either. I mean, it was not a good weekend for De Vries all along. I mean, in the main race qualifying, he hit the wall, bringing out the first red flag of the qualifying, and moving on to the race, clipping the wall, breaking the tire rod. I mean, it's just so much of a rookie mistake for a driver of his caliber who has so much racing pedigree, and having worked as a reserve driver for Mercedes, a championship winning team like Mercedes, you obviously have a lot of expectations out of him, and he certainly has not delivered this year so far. So moving on to Alpine, another team which had a disastrous weekend, and Pierre Gasly basically not having the perfect season that he was hoping for at Alpine. He was at a prime position to score some massive points for Alpine in Australia, completely blown that one up, and here as well in Azerbaijan. He had engine failure, his hydraulics had a leak which led to the car going up on flames, and in the race qualifying he hit the wall pretty hard, bringing out the second red flag. And in the race he was pretty much nowhere, and he managed to finish 14th in the race. And considering the straight line speed of the Alpine, it's quite an underwhelming performance from the team. I don't know if there is any issue with the car, or is it the issue with the driver. And Esteban Ocon as well, having to make some changes to the car, breaking the parc fermé rules. He had to start from the pit lane, and he managed to finish 15th. So on the whole, not a good weekend for Alpine. So talking about Aston Martin, well, Aston Martin's weekend was kind of filled with unpredictability issues with the DRS. At some parts of the sessions, the DRS worked fine, but at some parts it just did not work. And almost going into the sprint race, the team went in with almost of uncertainty on whether the DRS would work or not. But thankfully, the team to have got it all sorted out for the sprint race and for the main race, and the car worked beautifully well. If I'm not wrong, Fernando finished 6th on the sprint race, with Stroll taking the last place for the points, finishing 8th on the sprint weekend. And on the main race, Fernando managed to finish 4th after that brilliant overtake after the safety car on Carlos Sainz at turn 6. I mean, that is just classic Fernando Alonso, isn't it? Making moves at the most unconventional places and making it stick. Wow, I genuinely love the move, and I think that is probably the highest point. And Stroll managed to finish the race in 7th place, which is not that bad, but considering where Fernando finished, yeah, he could have probably finished ahead of Hamilton if it wasn't for the mistake that he did at the last turn before the long straight. So moving on to Mercedes, well, the pain continues. Well, we kind of expected this to happen for Mercedes in Baku. It's a track that has a long straight, and you need a car that is extremely drag efficient, and the Mercedes is just not that. Mercedes is just so draggy that the car is just losing so much time on the main straight. And for Hamilton, it didn't really look like he had issues on the straights mainly, but it was around the curves and the corners where he was losing pace to Carlos Sainz. So overall, a damage limitation weekend for Mercedes. They still bagged some decent result with finishing the sprint qualifying 4th with George Russell and 7th with Lewis Hamilton. And in the main race, Lewis managed to finish 6th with George Russell finishing 8th with a fast lap. So moving on to Ferrari, well, I think they were the biggest surprise for me this weekend. Well, the spring break that we took, the month-long break, Ferrari seemed to have brought some sizable improvements to the car. Their one lap pace certainly looks better than Red Bull, almost similar to what their car was at the start of the last season, comparing with the Red Bull. Red Bull certainly has the better long run race pace compared to the Ferrari, but Ferrari seems to have that upper hand on the one lap pace. And in terms of the long run race pace also, I feel like Ferrari has certainly improved and is right now better than Mercedes and on level with Aston Martin, if not better, which is a good sign of improvement. And if Ferrari can keep this up, I'm sure that in matter of months, Ferrari will be able to catch up to Red Bull. And with obviously Charles Leclerc taking pole in both the sprint race shootout and on the race qualifying, with Charles finishing 2nd in the sprint race and 3rd in the main race, with Carlos finishing 5th in both the sprint and in the main race. I think it's a decent weekend for Ferrari, which is a much needed one considering the bad luck that the team suffered both in Bahrain with the Charles retirement and with Charles retiring after being beached at the Australian Grand Prix. But it also seems like Ferrari still has the tire degradation issue over Red Bull, just like last year. That seemed to have just carried over from the last year's car, and that is the biggest drawback of the Ferrari car of last year's, the F175, and it's almost sad to see that it being carried over into the SF23. I was pretty certain that Ferrari's main consideration and focus would be for the next year's car last year would have been to have better tire degradation, but it's still there. After a couple of laps, their pace just completely falls on his face, and that's when the Red Bulls really wakes up. So yeah, I hope Ferrari do put some focus on fixing up their tire degradation issue. So moving on, McLaren, who also made a significant step up in this race weekend, with Lando finishing 9th in the race, with Oscar Piastri not too far away finishing 11th. It was a nice improvement, and Lando said that this is exactly where they wanted to start the season off with. Like Andrea Stella had said at the car launch, they were on a slight back foot at the start of the season, but it seems like they're slowly starting to catch up, and I'm sure that the fight between Alpine and McLaren is going to be spicy. I think Aston will still be clear of McLaren this season to be the clear favorite for at least P3 at the Constructors' Championship. But yeah, the fight between McLaren and Alpine is certainly going to get spicy as the season progresses. So moving on to the next team that I want to talk about, which is Alfa Romeo. I don't know what happened to them. Their car was pretty much nowhere all through the weekend. They had so much tire wear issue. They were probably the only team that had boxed so many times. So I don't know what happened, if it was a setup issue that they were suffering with, or was it just the car eating through the tires. I have no idea, but whatever it is very, very important for Alfa Romeo to get their act together before the cookie crumbles entirely. Let's talk about the highest point of the weekend. Well, as a viewer, a fan of Formula 1, I am a huge fan of Checo. I love him, but when he has a bad performance, I'm not afraid to be the harsh critic. And I think this weekend he really proved on what he can do. But again, this is another street track, and I think we can only assess his performance alongside Max only when we get to more of a traditional circuit like Silverstone. But so far from what we have seen from Checo, he is extremely motivated and driven, and genuinely outpaced Max in this weekend, I would say. Let's not forget that Max was actually working on the car as he was in the race, and only at the last 10 laps he really got on top of the car and felt comfortable to push the car in terms of setup and setting everything. And even in that case, the gap was not coming down astronomically quick. It was still pretty stable. So I think it's fair to say that Checo clearly had the upper hand this weekend. He was phenomenal in the sprint race, and he was equally phenomenal and consistent on the race weekend. Other than the slight tap that he hit the wall at turn 15 with his right front wheel, other than that, it has been a flawless weekend from him. He did get a bit lucky from the safety car, but still Max was P3 at the race restart, and he quickly made work of Charles. So we can't really say that Max was on a serious disadvantage there. So I think it's fair to say that Checo clearly had the upper hand this weekend, and I hope this has built some confidence in him going into the Miami, which is also kind of a street track. And last year he actually performed fairly well in Miami as well. If it wasn't for the fuel sensor issue, which restricted 40 horsepower from his car, he still managed to finish 4th. And if it wasn't for that issue, he should be clearly finishing either at least P3 last year in Miami. So I expect for him to perform really well in Miami as well. So I'm excited to see how Checo goes along with this season, if he stays on top of his game, and I hope he does not fall off a cliff like he did last year midway through the season. And yeah, I really hope we get a fight for the championship now that Red Bull is well clear of rest of the field. And I hope that if things goes right for Checo, maybe the third driver for Red Bull to win a championship, maybe not, which is something that we have to wait and watch, and I'm excited to see how everything transpires. But again, a brilliant drive from Checo. He was very comfortable with the car this weekend, and even on the first stint on the main race with the medium compound, he had better pace than Max. Max was chewing through his tires, whereas Checo was very comfortable. And even after post-race interviews, he said that his stint on the medium compound was actually really good, and he had tire life. And I'm sure that if it wasn't for the safety car, Red Bull would not have pitted Checo, because his tire life was good, his performance was very consistent, and if he hadn't pitted under the safety car, he would have actually lost out massively. And I think that's the only reason he actually boxed under the safety car. So overall, a brilliant, flawless weekend for the entire team at Red Bull. They can be proud of it, and I'm certain that they are. And I hope Checo can keep it up. Both Max and Checo were pushing each other so much all through this weekend, which was just brilliant to witness. And I hope this carries on to the end of the season. And I would like to make a quick note of appreciation for Oliver Baumann at Formula 2. He had a phenomenal weekend in Baku itself. I'm a huge fan of Oliver Baumann. I've been watching him in Formula 2 this season, from the start of the season, and his performance this weekend has been superb. And he got pole, and he won both the sprint and the main feature race. So kudos to him. I hope he can keep this up and win the championship this season. He's certainly in a team which can provide a car that can win a championship, and I genuinely think that Oliver Baumann is the next big thing to enter Formula 1. And Ferrari already seems to have all their eyes locked on him, which is great for him. And he's a true championship caliber driver. I see the talent in him, and I hope he gets a seat in Formula 1 after F2. And now let's talk about the FIA's pit lane confusion / disaster. What were they thinking? Genuinely, what were they thinking? The race was not done yet. I get that the FIA marshals had to prep the Parc Fermé before the race comes to an end, so that the photographers can click pictures of the top 3 finishers as they pull their cars into the Parc Fermé. But still, the race was not done yet, and clearly everyone knew that there is still one car that has to make a pit stop. How did the FIA and the marshals completely just let it go over their head is beyond me. And if you actually watch the onboard of Ocon as he entered the pits, it almost looks scary, especially the last person who dived literally out of the way. It was just a complete chaos, and it was completely unnecessary if you ask me. And I hope FIA really looks into it and gets this problem sorted out, because this is completely unnecessary. So yeah guys, with that being said, I would like to wrap up this video. This is my quick review and opinion on the Baku Grand Prix weekend. Let me know in the comments on what you thought of the weekend, what you thought of the race, and the whole sprint race format. I am excited to know your opinion on it. So with that being said, I would like to wrap up this video guys. I hope you all enjoyed. If you did, make sure to hit that thumbs up button, and don't forget to subscribe to the Autobahncast YouTube channel if you haven't already. And also hit that bell icon and turn on all notifications so you get notified whenever I upload a brand new video. It's me, your boy Autobahncast aka Vinesh, and I'm out. Love you guys, stay safe, peace.